All right, hey, welcome everybody. Excited to have you back on. Listening to the Legends of the 75th podcast. We have an awesome episode. A former regimental sergeant major of the 75th Ranger Regiment. Sergeant Major retired, Doug Pallister. He enlisted in the Army in 1983 and was first assigned to the 82nd. Then went on from there to 3 of the 325th Airborne in Vicenza, Italy, and also had a deployment to Desert Storm. In 1992 is when he actually got his Ranger career started in BCO 275. Which platoon, by the way, Sergeant Major?
I started in 1st platoon as a squad leader, then moved to 2nd platoon as a platoon.
2nd platoon, the best platoon. All right.
Yeah, we all know
that. And then he was a squad leader and platoon sergeant with a deployment to Haiti, and we'll talk about that. 1997, he went to be the Ranger liaison at DC for Ranger Branch. We will definitely talking about that as well. And then 1999, returned as the first sergeant of Charlie Company 275. I didn't realize it until I was going through it, but we actually have a lot of shared leadership positions within 275. Mm-hmm. And then went to USASMA. Upon graduating USASMA, 124th, 118th, and then finally coming back to 275 as the CSM, and then the regimental sergeant major. So Sergeant Major, it's awesome to have you on Legends today. How you doing?
Good, Mike. Thanks for having me. It's it's an honor. I think everybody says it, but I'm not a legend. I'm here to tell some stories about the legend of the regiment itself and all the phenomenal Rangers I get to serve with over my career. So it's a pleasure for being here.
Yeah, well, we're definitely happy to have you on, and I disagree with the legend, the legend status, and I know a lot of people feel the same way, but I will say you gave me one of the most legendary ass chewings I've ever had outside of Bernie Felino. So, maybe we'll just have you on. Oh, actually, Bernie Felino and Hugh Roberts. But this time, for everybody listening, I don't have a good rebuttal for the ass chewing that I received from Sergeant Major Pallister, like I did for Hugh Roberts. So I apologize. I actually deserved this one.
Well, that's good company to be in.
Yeah, it is. And I probably deserved it most of the time from Bernie Felino as well. So,
well, Mike, I will share with you another thing we have in common. Hugh Roberts gave me a sufficient amount of ass chewings when I know how you feel. I'll just leave it that way.
Yeah, it's funny talking to him now he's just so cool and calm and just relaxed. It's but I guess that goes for most guys after they retire.
Yeah. But
Sergeant Major, if we can, you have a significant career before you actually went to Ranger Regiment. So I definitely would love to hear you talk about that. You had a lot of time in airborne units and even a deployment before you went to the 75th.
Well, I started out as a private in the 82nd. Be all you can be. America's guard of honor and all that good stuff. And I tell you, it was a great unit. Spent 5.5 years there. I was in the same platoon. I think I was in 2 squads. I was in a line squad. I was one of the original saw gunners in the Army. I started out as an ammo bearer. It was just a great assignment. But after 5.5 years and division reviews and all this big Army stuff, I felt like I wanted to go somewhere else. So I called Branch. I was thinking about, being a drill sergeant because that's what everybody did back then. And they told me, unfortunately, I couldn't do that because I was on an assignment to a unit in Italy, to an airborne unit in Italy. What a phenomenal time that was. When I first showed up, the goal was to march around Italy with a red beret, as bad as that sounds. Training wasn't a big thing. And that was all because of the battalion leadership that we had. And then we got a guy named John Abizade. Some of the people listening to this know him very well.
Yeah.
He's a battalion commander. And I tell you what, turned the unit around overnight. It was all about training. It was all about deploying. And I'm glad he did because we got deployed to northern Iraq during the Gulf War, the whole Kurdish thing. Provide comfort, with the Kurds trapped up in the mountains. So we did the security zone. We were out there with a MEU from the Marines. And, we did that. I think we were there about 4.5, 5 months. So, great assignment, great unit. Couldn't ask for, a better way to start. And then it was before we were going to Italy, going to Iraq. Abazade got a bunch of Ranger School slots because I wasn't Ranger qualified. Back then, there wasn't a lot of slots going around. So a bunch of us were going to go. Then we got deployed to Iraq. We came back. They said, hey, you're still going to Ranger School in about 2 months. I turned around, and out of the 11 people that were going, I was the only one that was still willing to go. But they filled all the slots. We had a bunch of Spec 4s and surgeons, and we all filled the slots, and 10 out of the 11 ended up graduating.
Oh, wow.
But while I was in Ranger School, I met a bunch of young hooers. They called themselves Bat Boys at the time, and I found this brotherhood I never knew like existed. It was all about the Bat Boys, and it didn't matter what squad you were in Ranger School, what platoon you were in, what company you were in. If there's one thing that brought that group together against all others, it was we're from Bat. And it didn't matter what battalion you were from, because as we know, outside the regiment, it doesn't matter what battalion you're from.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's, because we're all Rangers when we're outside the regiment. Inside the regiment, my battalion's better than your battalion, my platoon's better than your platoon. But outside the regiment, don't mess with anybody in the regiment. So I was getting ready to leave Italy, and I knew, these guys were like, hey, you need to come to battalion. Some people will hate you because I learned another word back then too. It's called an import.
Oh, I wasn't going to say it.
And, so I got back, I called Branch, and I said, hey, I want to go to the Rangers. They said, hey, we can use you. We get slots in 375. We'd love to have you go. And so I said, hey, I'm in. And probably about 2-3 weeks after I called him, my wife was in the Army at the time too. She was a nuclear weapons specialist.
Wow.
The ones you shoot out of 155s, and they had them in Italy. Well, come to find out, they don't have them on Fort Benning. So he called me back. He said, hey, I can't get you to 375, but I can send you to 2nd Battalion. I was like, doesn't matter to me. I didn't know anything about the regiment, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, whatever. So with that being said, that's how I ended up in 275, because of those, those young PFCs in Ranger School that said, hey, they told me about the magic that happens in the regiment. And I saw them perform in Ranger School, and it was good. And I'm glad it all worked out.
So arriving to 275, two different kind of questions here. One, what was it feeling when you finally, got to the 75th and you talked about that brotherhood and, that sense of community that, Rangers have, but then also arriving as a staff sergeant 11 Bravo, and I'm sure there was probably some moments where, you were overwhelmed because, the expectations that are put on, the squad leaders in the unit.
It was, I felt like I was ready. I kind of knew what was, I was in good shape for one. But, it was tough. I mean, coming into the regiment, everybody's running around with a right shoulder scroll.
Yeah.
Hey, we just get back from Panama. I watched Panama. I left the 82nd, went to Italy, and 6 months later, watched my unit jump into Panama. So, pretty much everybody in 275, leader-wise, had the scroll. So that's like the first thing that stuck out. But, any unit you go into in the Army, because it is what it is, especially a combat unit, you got to prove yourself. And that's what nobody's going to give you anything when they think that, as a squad leader, that, your squad's going to be providing support fire for my squad as we go into a building or we go down ranges and objectives. So you got to kind of prove yourself. I didn't have a big, a special ops background, but honestly back then, it was more about going out to South Rainier and sucking, in the rain with your Gore-Tex and your rucksack. And I had a lot of experience with that. So
that's true.
And then just to add to that, I was fortunate because two of the squad leaders I had in my platoon, my fellow squad leaders, one of them, we all know Marty Barreras, rest his soul. But he was, Marty was a former Marine, not an ex-Marine, but a former Marine. So he kind of knew serving And then Dave Fitzsimmons, who actually was, an import fellow 82nd, that, was there for about 2 years. So that kind of helped on the whole transition piece. But
Yeah, that's two individuals that are awesome to help with kind of that transition, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't in a regiment that long, and then, you guys get deployed to Haiti. What was that experience like? We've actually not talked about that on Legends too much.
Well, it was interesting. We had, so I was a second platoon. So was I? What was I still in? I'm not sure. I forget. I think I was still in first platoon. It was a Sunday morning, and my wife was in the National Guard at that time, and she was actually out on a field problem. So I got a phone call, and they said, "Hey, you got to come in." I was like, another Sunday road march. Somebody checking that block. We're going to do 30 miles and lay out, make sure we got our shaving kit, and then, we'll all go home. So as I was leaving, my wife was coming in and out of the field. I said, "Hey, I'll probably be back, 2-3 hours." I think that turned into like 7 weeks. But we basically went in. They closed the quad gates. Within a couple of days, we were flying out, and we were at 175 out at the Sable Hall area, doing some range shooting, confirming zeros, so on and so forth. And then we ended up down in Gitmo.
Oh, okay.
So we were down in Gitmo. They had a bunch of GP mediums kind of on the hill overlooking the airfield. We lost third platoon, the Jeep and bike platoon. They went with 175 out to the ship. And then third bat was going to be jumping in. So, we were doing, everything, out there in Gitmo. A lot of the ranges at Gitmo were tidal friendly. The tide would go out. You could run down there and shoot, stick the stuff in the ground. But, we knew what to do. We were there to train on the basics and get ready to go. We had 53s on the ground. I still remember to this day where we were in Major Cole, who was the XO, was actually the acting battalion commander, and was sitting around a sand table with all the Air Force 53 pilots. And somebody asked him about loads, "Hey, how many people we can bring?" And the guy looked at me and goes, "You can bring all of them. We'll stack everybody you want." Well, he didn't know how Rangers stack cattle cars.
Yeah.
And come to find out, I think we could have about 20 who was on the 53 or somewhere. Once they figured out how much we weigh with body armor and how much ammo we like to carry and all the extra water and chow and everything else. So we were at Gitmo. It was showtime. We got down there. Everybody's ready to go, pumped up. We've all trained for this. We're going to the show, as they say. We get inside the birds start going. I think we might have been 5 feet off the ground, and they come back down. I think it was Powell and some other ex-president or somebody that got on the ground, and they were negotiating. So we're like, "Hey, you're not going tonight." And then we did that one more time. We went down to the airfield, never loaded and never went. So now we're kind of just hanging out. An SF guy got shot. Probably 30 minutes later, 45 minutes later, BCO was in the 53s flying away. We had nothing but water, ammo, some extra MREs. I don't even think we brought a toothbrush because they say we'd be back in 24 hours. And we were there about 6 days. We went down there, went to the SF compound. I think the city was Lacaille, if I remember right.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of provided security around the city. And then from there, went out and ran patrols. We did hotwire a bunch of vehicles because we had no way to get around. So between an SF guy who had a big wad of cash and our hotwire equipment, we were able to outfit. It kind of looked like the Beverly Hillbillies. We just had, those flatbed trucks, and when we would fly down the road, it was kind of comical. But there was no direct contact or anything. It was more like just security, see what's happening. I want to say we were there about 4 or 5 days. And then somebody came, I think ACO came in and relieved us after that, if I remember right.
Yeah. So definitely, many people would talk about that deployment, and it's, not the deployment that they wanted to have, especially, after Panama, and being
Yeah.
raised by Panama Rangers.
Yeah.
So, after that, you leave and you had to be the Ranger liaison for, the 75th Ranger Regiment up in DC, because it was located at DC at that time. And that's some, we haven't actually talked about that, but how pivotal that role is for the 75th, and also how spoiled Rangers can be because of, having that liaison kind of up there.
Yeah. I was part of the Ranger branch, and not me, but the position, I know at the time, is probably one of the most important positions in the regiment.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is, the regiment, and I don't know what they have now, but back then we had a Maloff, which allowed us to be at about 105% strength.
Okay.
But, getting infantry guys wasn't never a problem, because I worked in the infantry branch. And Rick Waterhouse was the colonel of the infantry branch. Him and General Colonel McChrystal at the time were friends. He'd give us anybody we wanted, infantry wise. But the importance of that position was, you were able to reach out to the other, I think at the time, 33 or 35 different MOSs in the regiment, and pull those people in. I could go down to the Camo. I got a 4187 at the time from this young Hua coming off recruiting. Looked at his packet. He looked Hua. He was a Camo guy. His name was Clay Usi. You might know him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he did okay. He did
okay.
But I was able to go down to the Camo branch and say, hey, I've got this guy. I want to bring him into the Ranger Regiment. And the guy's like, well, he's only been here this long, and I got to push it up and get it approved. And I was able to go, because the backing the regiment had. I was like,
Right.
if you sign this paper releasing him, I'll do all the paperwork, and I'll get all the sign offs. He's like, really? And then I'd bring it back to Colonel Waterhouse, and he'd sign it off, and away we go. So, the amount of people that you could take care of, and the amount of leadership. My neighbor told me one time, he worked in the Pentagon. He had a 75 hotel admin guy that worked for him. That was Hua, and he wants to do something Hua. And, I'd love to meet him, and I should meet him. I said, yeah, bring him over. So Saturday morning, I have this guy knock on my door, and I open up the door, and here's this guy standing on my front lawn at Parade Rest on a Saturday in civilian clothes. And his name was Escobedo.
Oh, shit.
And another guy, he did fairly well in the regiment.
Yeah, he did. And he's still doing well.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. And he's still leading in the Army, him and Rendon and all them other guys. So we were able to bring him in, get him through all the training, send him to 275. He worked for Roger at 275, and then took over the pack, and then took over the regiment. He was the first son of, RHHC. So you look at people like that, but the importance of that position is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Because you're able to to get the people that the regiment needs, and more importantly, get the right people.
Yeah. Yeah, Sergeant Major Escobedo, we actually we went through airborne school together, and then he went to RAS. He went to ROPE, and I went to RIP. After airborne school. So yeah, we went through airborne school together. So I actually saw him, I think about 3 months ago. He stopped by Fort Benning, so it was good to see him. I hadn't seen him in forever.
Yeah, he's doing great.
Yeah, he is. He's continuing to kick ass. Well, you definitely named some pivotal individuals, while you were working at Ranger Branch that, you pulled in that filled critical positions. Are there any more that kind of come to mind? I'm curious.
Now those are the two that stick out the most.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing in that job that I enjoyed is you were able to cut through the red tape of the Army and take care of Rangers. Because between me and the guy who managed the RTB, we managed all the 11 Bravo Rangers in the Army, and we were able to get who we need in the regiment. But the key to that is there's only one reason we were able to do that. It had nothing to do with me. It had nothing to do with, Mike Hall as a RSM or, Colonel McChrystal at the time. If the regiment wasn't what it was and didn't have the reputation that it did, those branch managers would not have thought that it was a good assignment, and they would have kept those people, because a guy like Clay or Escobedo or in the commo world or the 70, they're gold.
Absolutely.
They're gold. They've got 100 jobs that they can fill. So why should I give them to you? But when you sit there and you go, hey, I'm going to bring this guy to the Ranger Regiment, and they go, holy shit, the Ranger Regiment? I thought only gods went to the Ranger Regiment.
Yeah.
You know, nope. We're just a bunch of, you know, people that just want to serve. So you were able to bring those type of people into the regiment. And to me, that was the great part about the job. And you could, like I said, you could cut through the BS. I could move guys in 12 months, 18 months. I just had to get somebody to sign off on it. If I wanted to move a guy in 9 months, for some reason, it would go to the EPMD commander. She was a 1-star. And she'd be like, what do you need? Sign off on the paperwork. And that's
awesome.
That's always because of the reputation of the regiment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and, you know, so you leave that assignment and you go to, you know, you go back to 275 to be Charlie Company's, you know, first sergeant. You know, did that position help prepare you to be a first sergeant? Because I feel, you know, a lot of times us as Rangers, you know, the administrative and, you know, the workings of the Army is something that we lack a lot of time, you know, and that can cause struggles being a first sergeant.
Yeah, I think, yeah, when I went to that job, I had, I think, you know, 13 years in the Army or something like that. And it was E1 through E7 in a you know, 3 different line, you know, in a line platoon. So, you know, I was a knuckle dragon line, got, you know, throw grenades, shoot bullets.
Yeah.
And, you know, I went up there and I put my Class Bs on, and it was like, I had no idea what to do. But the thing is, like in the Army, everything is covered in the regulations.
Yeah.
So one good thing about, you know, not knowing anything and being in a job like that, you get 2 options. You can kind of, you know, make it up, and the guy you go see is going to call you a clown, or you can pull the regulation out and just read it, you know. And so the long story answer to your question is, that job probably prepped me for being a first sergeant major, you know, better than any other job I could have had after being a platoon sergeant.
Yeah, absolutely. So Charlie Company, you know, being a first sergeant at Charlie Company, the professionals, as we were called, you know,
Yeah.
I don't know if that name existed when you were the first sergeant or not, but, you know, what was, you know, what a lot of people look at as the pinnacle of their career, especially Rangers, is being a Ranger first sergeant. You know, what was that experience like?
It was phenomenal. But, you know, when you work with guys like, you know, Dave Christensen and Garganta, and, you know, I had Frank Genio and Adam Rock as company commanders. I mean, how can it just not be, you know, a phenomenal assignment? You look at some of the squad leaders across the board. You know, Denman was a Spec 4, then a sergeant, then a staff sergeant. You know, Jeremiah Congdon was, you know, a squad leader, and then, you know, moved up to be, you know, was always at, you know, I'm a squad leader today, but now I'm a platoon sergeant, going back and forth. Dave McDowell, rest his soul. You know, just across the board. Jeff Jackson. I mean, I could go on. Rodriguez. I could go on forever. So
yeah.
when you work with people like that, your job's easy.
Yeah.
You know, and it's always that, and we've all gone down that road of, you know, as a platoon sergeant, to me, the best job in the Army is the Ranger Rifle platoon sergeant.
I don't disagree.
By far, because you're close enough to the fight that you can still be in the fight. As a first sergeant, you know, it's one of those things. You know, Christensen didn't need me out at the range to help his guys shoot reflexive fire.
Yeah.
To be honest, if I was out there, it's because I wanted to shoot reflexive fire. You know, Garganta didn't need me to go out to the range to teach them guys demo. What they needed was they needed somebody to resource them to go out and train their soldiers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I learned that from Carlton Dietrich, who was my first sergeant in BCO in 275, you know. So that's always the trick. You know, what do you do as a first sergeant? You know, some people, I want to be that fighting first sergeant or whatever. And I, you know, when I was a sergeant major, it was the same thing. So you just got to figure out, you know, where your piece is, you know, get out there and, you know, where you fit in the best. And I always looked at it as, you know, if it's platoon training, which as we know as Rangers, that's what we do the best. That's the core of training right there. Unless you're doing PT, but if it's platoon training, resource those platoon sergeants and platoon leaders, because we get some pretty damn good platoon leaders, you know, because they're second and third platoon. So work with the XO, work with the company commanders, resource those people, and then mentor those platoon leaders. It's amazing how much mentorship, you know, a first sergeant can give to a platoon leader.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that it was phenomenal. But you know, it was phenomenal because, like I said, I worked with guys like, you know, all the superstars I just named, and my fellow first sergeants, like, you know, Randy Inman, Matt Walker, Dave Turnbull. I mean, you know, we had the, I think we were the only full Yankee, you know, all from New England, you know, in the regiment. But it was, you know, when your peers are like that, and, you know, Hugh Roberts was the sergeant major, you know, life was good. So I have no complaints.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, being a platoon sergeant is definitely, you know, the best job ever. But I will say that, you know, in the way I've kind of quantified it is that being a first sergeant was probably one of the most rewarding positions I ever had, because you really see, you know, those team leaders, you know, get it. The light bulb goes on, they become the squad leaders become platoon sergeants, and then your platoon sergeants go and be first sergeants, you know, in other companies. And you get to see that because it's a larger formation a lot. And I just found it incredibly rewarding. Or watching.
Yeah, I think, you know, to your point, I think, you know, as a platoon sergeant, you know, you have effect on the people right in front of you, and it's all about like training. But
right,
your point, as you know, as a first sergeant and a sergeant major, you can start having effect on Rangers' careers.
Right. Yeah.
Because like you said, you know, moving, you know, and the bad thing is sometimes, you know, you don't make a whole lot of friends when you get that squad leader and you're going to move that, you know, that team leader gets promoted, and you know him, but you're going to move. You know, I was never one with a hard set policy. If you do this, you're going to do this. But you know, you get that team leader get promoted to squad leader, and you know him. You know he's a little bit friendly, but you know he's a good leader. You know, move him to another platoon.
Yeah,
he'll only hate you for like a month. After that, realize that first platoon's no different than second platoon. And then he'll be sending his guys to tape up people in his old platoon. So it really. But yeah, I mean, great point. You can really start having an effect, you know, because you kind of understand the bigger, you know, bigger thing. It's not, you know, the importance of an NCOER, and, you know, it's not just a bunch of left side bullets if they're on the left side, if I remember. You know, it's supporting those with, and that was the other thing, back to the branch thing. You review a whole lot of packets, and you'd be looking at dudes' NCOERs, and you'd be like, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
You know, is a great guy, you know. So, you know, if you want to take care of soldiers, if you want to take care of Rangers, you know, it's not just teaching them how to shoot.
Yeah,
they've got a squad leader and a platoon sergeant to do that. And I tell you, it's a great feeling to be able to do that. But then there's a big part of it that sucks, because that's what you really want to do.
Yeah,
you want to get out there and blow shit up and wire the vehicle yourself.
No, absolutely. But you know, we all have a role, and you just gotta understand where you play into it. So, you know, you leave, you know, 275 again, and now, you know, you're at USASMA, and I'm curious because 9/11 happened while you were at the Sergeant Major Academy, and I'm sure that was probably an emotional event, and because it's an emotional event for everybody, but knowing that you're locked into, you know, being at the academy, you know, for the next 9 months before you can get back out into the force.
Yeah, you're locked into TRADOC.
Yeah.
You had to go to, you know, you had to go to full PT uniform on October 11th or whatever stupid date that was, just because that's what it said in the books. And you watch your old unit, you know, jumping into combat in Afghanistan or deploying somewhere else, and you have no idea what they're doing, but you know they're doing something, because you're out of the loop.
Yeah.
It really kind of sucked. But you know, it's like anything, you know, you got through it. But at the time, we really thought, you know, and it's weird, you know, we've always, I'm not a warmonger by any means. I'll always joke around with people, hey, don't start a war for me, but if you do, give me a call because I'd love to come. The but you know, we all thought we were going to miss it.
Right.
And I was in USASMA with a guy named Mike Flowers, and Mike was in, he was in, I forgot what battalion, it's like, you know, E1 through E5, but just a phenomenal infantryman. And I remember he came out in the CSM program, and his battalion was deploying like a couple weeks after graduation. I remember him running across the parking lot, taking his uniform off, handing it to his wife, stuffing it in the back of the car. And he's like, I gotta go. And, you know, he took off, and because we were all afraid we were going to miss it. And then I think it was about 7, 8 years later, I was in Mike's office in Afghanistan, and he was on probably his 5th deployment.
Yeah.
He was a brigade sergeant major by that time, and I was the RSM, and just sitting around and laughing, going, Mike, remember we thought we were gonna miss all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a, you know, it was a, you know, once you settled in and accepted it at USASMA, you know, it is what it is. It was a big trade arc school. I'm not going to bash it academy too much, but it was what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. But I mean, we all had, you know, kind of relevant reason for thinking that, though, because, you know, I mean, previous, you know, you had Mogadishu, you had Haiti, you had even, you know, Desert Storm, Panama, you know, all that stuff. They were over very quickly. You know, they didn't last a very long time. So we thought this was going to be the same way. Little did we know 20 years later, we'd still be, you know, cycling Rangers through Afghanistan and even Iraq. So,
well, you know, 275, I'm almost 99% sure this is correct. We were on RRF-1 when they decided to deploy Rangers to Mogadishu.
I don't know that one. I'll have to ask. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that was true. I could be wrong, or we were close to going on it. And somebody made the decision that, hey, they got time for train up. You know, you guys have already been through all the qualifications for RRF-1 with all the various different colors. So we're going to leave you on our RRF-1 and we're going to deploy 375. So it's like, hey, you fucked me again.
No, I mean, I will tell you that, you know, we gave, you know, I talked to General McChrystal. I had him on Legends, and, you know, I asked him what the hell about Afghanistan, because we were literally in Germany. We were right next to the largest airfield, you know, that side of the world. You know, we were ready to go, you know, after 9/11. So why did they pick 375, you know? And he had a good reason, but I was like, whatever, that doesn't matter. We were still closer.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. None of those reasons matter until you look back at it 5 or 6 years later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, you know, after, you know, completing USASMA, you know, you go and you have multiple deployments, you know, with, you know, the conventional army, you know, with 124 and 118, you know, what was, you know, those deployments like? And, you know, were you trying to get back to Ranger Regiment, or did you just get a call one day? How did that all work?
So I didn't deploy with 124. I went up and I went to the,
okay.
124 was the strikers. The brigade on the other side of the airfield deployed. I was wrapped up in the whole digital talk and the FBCB2 and stuff that I, you know, once again, great people I served with, but I really didn't have a whole lot of desire to do. And fortunately, after about 10 months, I went over to Germany as a battalion CSM of 118 infantry. And we deployed about 10 months later, and we got there for OIF2. And you know, we did a 1-year tour. We were on FOB Danger, and it was kind of funny because, you know, we were the infantry battalion that owned the decrypt battle space, and I remember, you know, the division headquarters was there. My battalion commander had a great relationship with the division CG. And I remember there was like this house in the middle of FOB Danger. And they all said, hey, you know, that's where the special ops guys hang out. You know, and I always thought, I'm just going to go up and knock on the door. But, you know, it was just like, you know, you never did. So, they were, Rangers were there at the time doing their own thing. It was a little bit different. Back then, as we all know, the mission, they still didn't, they were still kind of solidifying, what's the difference between all the different colors and, where a Ranger is going to go. And now, as we all know, it doesn't really matter. But that was a great tour with 118. And then, do you try to come back as a sergeant major? I always wanted to come back as a sergeant major.
Right.
But I don't think that's not really that's not really a phone call you make. Hey man, if you need a sergeant major, give me a call. But Randy Inman contacted me when I was in Iraq, and he said, "Hey, I get selected for regiment. Are you interested in going? Coming in 275?" And I said, "Hell yeah." And I was going home on R&R. I think it was like October. What would that be? October of 2004, maybe.
Okay.
So I was going back to Fort Lewis on R&R. He said, "Hey, just come by and see me when you're up here for R&R." So I went by to see him, met Dave Haight, who was battalion commander, kind of interview with him. We said, "Hey, we want you. But we need to send you down to Benning to go through the qualifications." So I was on R&R, and I spent most of my R&R down at Benning doing push-ups and a road march and a 5-mile run and the psych eval with Art Finch.
Art Finch, yeah.
Yeah, the famous regimental psych. And, got selected for that. And I, it was kind of bad because when the 1st Infantry Division had a policy that nobody was going to leave for, I think, 90 days when we redeployed. I'm not sure. They just wanted people to get stable and not. So I had to enforce that policy. And I tell people, hey, because everybody wanted to leave and go somewhere else when we get back. And I said, hey, you guys can't leave for 90 days because that's a division policy. But I'm leaving in 3 weeks. So, the CG supported the move. And I came back like February 11th. I went home on leave, came back from leave. And I think I probably left about 30 days later, and the battalion was actually deployed. And so I came back, I dropped my bags in my office and got on a plane, and I was back in Iraq up in Mosul. Colonel Haight was up in Mosul. And I think Jasper Jeffers was the company commander at the time, and JD DeBusk was the first sergeant running around Mosul. And life changed. I didn't even realize that, I went from being a battle space owner, conventional, doing all that stuff to, in Mosul at the time, it was, out the gate, spank a target, come back. And it was good.
So what was your kind of observations, coming back after, you left, for USASMA, September 11th happened, and, for the next 3 years, Rangers have a pivotal kind of change in, their requirements, downrange, and the missions that we were doing and everything else, as General McChrystal wanted more strike forces to hit more targets to put pressure on the enemy. There was a lot of changes, not only in the gear, but the missions and how we did things. What was, kind of your observations of that as, coming as a battalion CSM?
Well, I think, 9/11 enabled the regiment to showcase what we all know they could do.
Yeah, absolutely.
If 9/11 would never have happened and we didn't need all them strike forces and we would have just stayed with the, RRF-1 and deploying with this and deploying with that, it would have been tough to get that, to say, hey, let's be honest, we're just, a Ranger platoon is just as good as anybody raiding the target, downtown Mosul or anywhere else. But what's really good is a Ranger platoon and all them other elements all put together. All them other elements, some of the alphabet soups elements, and we formed task force. That one that was up in Mosul, you had, I think it was a troop from Green. Can we say that?
Yeah.
So, we had a troop from Green, we had a bunch of MI out of JSOC that were, interrogators. Ariel, who was she was a female interrogator. I know a bunch of people remember her. She spoke fluent Arabic. She was just amazing when it came to interrogating people on the objective. But I really think 9/11 gave regiment the ability to showcase what we all knew in the regiment that they could do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, you remember when we did the striker thing?
Yeah.
When we first deployed the strikers, we didn't have anybody that knew how to drive a striker.
Nope.
So, we had two options because we're going to deploy them and we're going to deploy them now. So what's the best way to do that? We went down the road and we got a platoon of striker guys, infantry guys from down the road. I think they might have been 19s or whatever, but and they came down and they were the experts at driving the strikers.
Yep.
We didn't worry about that. And that was another thing I think where, I used the word grow up or whatever. It's probably not the right word. But we realized that, the Army is a big place and we all have our piece in it. And I realized that, being deployed with 118, and if you remember in regiment, at first, I won't say we didn't care, but when you went into somebody's battle space, you did what you did and you left it as it was. And then you left and you got on with your mission. And as we went along, we realized that that's not it's not really a good way to prosecute targets.
Yeah.
Because, and so we started doing the what's wrong with calling the battle space owner, and saying, hey man, we're going down to SWAC a target in your area. Don't come in. We'll call you when we're done. And then we would do the changeover and they would come in and the battle space owner would roll in, whether it was a platoon, a company, whatever. And we'd say, okay, here's the target we did. These are the people we took. Here's some damage we did. Here's the $300 we're paying these people for the door or for the window. And now you're here and you know exactly what we did. And granted, you're going to have to deal with these people, but that's the fact of life. But at least then there was none of this BS that, they would call up the mayor the next day and go, they burned my house down to the ground.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't do any of that.
Yeah. No, I've had to have that conversation like many times, going out in a conventional army and they're like, oh, you were a Ranger Regiment. Yeah, you used to fly in the middle of the night and fucking burn everything to the ground and then leave. And we wouldn't know who did it at first, you're like, yeah, we kind of learned our lesson from that. And that's why we started calling you guys and telling you guys what we were doing or, trying to integrate you in because we definitely did not make a lot of friends during some of those times. Yeah, I definitely agree.
But also, Mike, I mean, we know, you can't talk about rules of engagement from, when I went to 118, when we deployed, 04, if you were out in the street after 10 o'clock, you get shot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what happened. And then while we were there, that changed. We brought in with the ING and then we started bringing in the Iraqi police. So you can't just shoot anybody because there's a good chance that they're a good guy. So, those rules of engagement change. And it's the same way with what we did. I mean, the stuff we were doing, in 2003 or, in Afghanistan and the first part of Iraq, it was done for a reason.
Yeah.
But then as the regiment, as time went by and, times change and everybody got better at what they did, well, then we started doing things like, contacting the battle space owner and handing it over to the battle space owner and doing all that. So I'm not one to say we were screwed up because we weren't doing it in 2004. We just didn't know any better.
Yeah. No, we had to learn. Yeah.
No, when I was in 118, everybody that had speaker wire in their house was detained because IED maker until we figured out that, hey, that's only speaker wire.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think back to your original question that, 9/11 allowed the regiment to showcase who they were. And then like anything, it goes back to what I was talking about, that reputation. The regiment made its reputation. And because, as we all know, you don't get anything for free. You know, and I haven't been around, you know, I went down to Regiment for a memorial back in the summer, you know, and if you go around Regiment, I was up in 275, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, you walk around and you see what's in the unit. Their resource pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, you get super gyms, you get physical therapists, you've got this, you've got that, but nothing's for free. Nothing's given to anybody for free.
No, it's not.
And the reason that the regiment is, and I won't say is given what they have, the reason they're resourced how they are, you know, between the Army resourcing them, you know, we know the Army gives them money, USASOC gives them money, JSOC gives, I mean, there's pots of money all over the place. They get that because of the reputation that was built that was started, you know, shit, all the way back to, you know, guys climbing the cliffs of Pointe du Hoc.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, all the way up in the plank holders from 1st and 2nd Battalion who have built that reputation, and then the regiment. And then when 9/11 happened, you proved it. And I mean, you couldn't, that's why the regiment is resourced how it is. That's why that's why we were able to stand up an RSTB. That's why they were able to stand up a Delta company. That's why they were able to stand up an Echo company. You know, that stuff, that costs a lot of money. But more importantly, money doesn't matter to the Army in the long run, because we got plenty of it. You know, the government would just take out another loan and pay for what they want to pay. What it costs, more importantly, is bodies.
Yeah.
And it costs outstanding soldiers, because for every outstanding soldier the regiment has, you know, the big Army doesn't have.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
If you're gonna have the Escobedos and the Rendons and the Richards and all these low density, I don't know if we call them low density MOSs anymore, but respect the hell out of them. If you're going to have the cream of the crop of those individuals, you know, you better prove that you can get things done. And the regiment's done that.
Yeah.
You know, they've done it since Pointe du Hoc all the way up through 9/11. And I have no, you know, and they continue to do it. So.
Yeah, I agree. But I think, you know, they take those individuals, and I think those 3 individuals are perfect examples. You know, you take those individuals, you put them in, you know, the Ranger Regiment, and then on the back end, all of them went out to serve as CSMs, you know, in the, you know, the conventional Army, even a few of them, you know, actually as first sergeants too, you know, and then coming back at some point. And they absolutely made units just tremendously better, you know. So, you know, they sacrificed a resource, but they got a return on the investment, in my opinion, you know, and a lot of, you know, and you just look, you know, you look across the Army now, you know, you got Mullinex, you got Barker, you got Nash, you got Sergeant Major Albertson, you got all these different individuals that have just went out and just, you know, made the Army better in a lot of ways.
And who's replacing Nash?
Yeah, Caprati. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I mean, you know, it's Abrams. I mean, Mike, I mean, it's Abrams charter at its best.
I don't know if I bet anybody better.
Yeah. I mean, that's, you know, and that's the thing. I mean, we could go, you know, go across the Army and look.
Yeah.
And, you know, it really goes back to, you know, you look at, you know, you say when I came in the regiment, what was different? And I don't say this to say anything bad about the big Army, because I spent 31 years in the Army. I think 13 or 14 of it in regiment and the rest of it in the big Army. You know, I think the big Army is, you know, phenomenal. I spent 3 years working for the Navy, and they're good people too. But you know, the difference was, you know, when I was in Italy, you know, there were about, and I'll say this, like 4 or 5, you know, you had like 1 or 2 squad leaders per platoon who was like, you know, could have went to regiment, you know, done the thing, and, you know, was kind of the full package, you know, understood, shoot, move, communicate, was halfway decent leader, you know, PT, all that. And you probably had 1 or 2 platoon sergeants per company. But, you know, when I went to regiment, it was kind of like, shit, you know, probably 90%. Now, we'll be honest, it's probably like 90%, because, you know, there's always, you know, we all have our challenges on different things.
Yeah.
one of them, I don't know. But it's just a great group of individuals.
Yeah.
I kind of got off track there, but
No. I think it's good, and I mean, the thing I would always say is, about Ranger Regiment is it's a collection of talent. And in the conventional army, sometimes you have to hunt for the talent. They're there.
yeah,
They're the people, the officers and the NCOs and even the warrant officers that should have been in Ranger Regiment. But for whatever reason, were never afforded the opportunity, didn't know about it, didn't know it was a possibility, or actually denied it in some situations, and once you find them, one, they'll gravitate towards you and your leadership. But two, once you find them, like, they're your go-to people, and they're what makes the world go round,
yeah, for sure. And when I was a battalion sergeant major in 118, I had the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, they weren't all like 11 Bravo Ranger qualified. I mean, some of them were 11 mics.
Yeah.
But they were just good leaders. Some of them, I mean, my motor pool sergeant, had 138, what were they, 88, whatever, mics or whatever.
Yeah, mics, yeah.
Just phenomenal leader.
Yeah.
And like you said, you got to find your core. That was kind of the difference in being a battalion sergeant major in the Rangers as opposed to the big army.
Yeah.
When we were getting ready to deploy in 118, my battalion commander, who I was his ops at 275 when he was the 3, he said, "Sergeant Major," he goes, "I want you to go out, shoot, and set up a reflexive fire range." I think I was the only guy in the battalion who knew what reflexive fire was. So I get the vision to, well, how do we do that? Well, I get this manual from regiment. I need, I need X amount. I don't know. I think we went with like 45 magazines per or something like that. And we went out to the range. I remember going out there, at 275, I would just be like, "Hey, we're shooting reflexive fire. Cool. Maybe I'll come out Thursday and check y'all out." Because it was happening. I had platoon sergeants who could do that.
Yeah.
Out there, I had to go out to the range and say, people were like, and don't get me wrong, these were all 11 mics who could kill tanks and blow up buildings and gun that Bradley, like, but we were only taking a platoon to Iraq. So you had to go out there and literally teach them how to do reflexive fire.
Yeah.
In the regiment, you were just resourced.
Yeah. No, I mean, I have the, so 2CR, that was my CSM position coming out of USASMA. And, I happened to go out to a range, and they were doing some glass drills for Battle Drill 6. And, I was like, okay, what are we doing here? And then I was like, okay, we're not doing this right. So I was, and I was, walking them through. And then, the squad leaders and platoon sergeants were like, "Hey, we really want to, get a Battle Drill 6 class. We want to do a live fire." And I was like, well, by a show of hands, who's ever done this in a live fire situation? And no hands went up, and I was like, okay. And then with a little bit more investigation, I was like, there's no one qualified to teach this. I guess I'm going to have to do it as a CSM, and I'm literally out there, teaching them how to do Battle Drill 6, so we can build up to a live fire situation. I was like, holy shit, but yeah, in Ranger Regiment, like, why is this our major out here? Like,
yeah,
it definitely.
But when you get through all that minutia, the dudes that you're teaching to do that live fire, God, that's why they join the Army.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yep, absolutely.
And that's what's always painful.
Yep.
A dude joins the Army. I say dude, do that, women, whatever. To me, they're all soldiers and Rangers. It doesn't matter. They join the Army to be in the Army.
Yeah.
So let them be in the Army. They want to blow stuff up. They want to shoot things. I remember I had a company commander named Paul LaCamera. And he used to say, he goes, "Hey, don't call the regiment unless you want stuff broken."
Yeah,
because true. That's what we do.
Yeah.
I mean, things are going to be broken, and anybody who knows, who's probably listening knows what I'm talking about. We're just not going to go in and break things to break things. Well, some people do, and that kind of goes back to that.
Yeah.
Goes back to that. Setting up the regiment for success and not looking like an ass. But don't call the regiment unless you want something broken.
I agree. So, staying on your 275 time, as a CSM, I got kind of two questions I wanted to ask for you. One, you said you had a story about Jeremiah Congdon and a chicken farm. So I'd love to hear for you to tell that story.
I'm sure I'll screw it up, but as a sergeant major, the good thing was, Dave High and I,
Dave High. There's
yeah,
another
High.
good name right there.
Dave
Awesome.
High. Dave was my travel buddy. So, what better thing?
He's bad luck though. Like he breaks legs, gets set on fire, gets shot. Like Jesus.
Yeah, but it's all on himself. There's no proof.
That's true. So he takes all the bad luck and he diverts it away from you. Okay, good point.
So we would travel around from fob to fob to fob between Afghanistan and Iraq, and it was good because nothing's better than going out and just talking to Rangers, and then Dave could always throw the spin in there after you get them all motivated about trying to re-enlist them for another 4 years. But I would ask guys, I'd say, hey, I said, anybody know what a rumor is? And I'm getting to your question, but people would look at you like you're crazy. And I say, hey, a rumor is a question that nobody's ever had the balls to ask somebody who knows what the real answer is. So I'm here to dispel any rumors that you have. So then everybody would be asking about boots and, when can I change my boots out and all that other stuff, because that was a big thing.
Yeah, fair.
So with Jeremiah, you think we were looking for a reporter that kind of disappeared. It was questionable whether she was snatched or whatever, but everybody was looking for this reporter. I think she was a reporter, not an NGO, but I'm pretty sure she was a reporter. So we were hitting everything. If there was any intel, we would hit it. So we had some intel. I forgot what fob we were even working out of at the time. But I was up there with Jeremiah's platoon was. So we jumped on a helicopter with him and we took off. And, we landed in this open field and a bunch of big buildings. And you're kind of looking at the buildings going, they kind of look familiar, but, so we hit, where we thought one building was, it wasn't actually a building there. It was just a cement pad. So going from building to building. So we finally got to this one building and we breached in, went in. Jeff Jackson was the squad leader. And his squad was going in. I was, somewhere in the back trying to stay out of the way where sergeant majors probably should be. But, so we went in and now we're in this, it was like an octagon room and there was doors going, either way. So it was like, okay, keep an eye on this door. We're going in here. So I remember going in and actually went into this room with them. There were like 6 of us. We had no idea what was on the other side, just like we always do. So we go in and here's all these badass Rangers. It's in the middle of the night. You got lasers on, you got lights out, and we're looking at about probably 40 to 50,000 chickens. Just bloop, 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 bloop. It was a giant chicken coop, and it stunk so bad.
Oh, I can only imagine.
And the only thing we were wishing is that somebody didn't make us search this entire chicken coop for. So yeah, that was kind of the funny story. But it was always great to get out out with Rangers. I went out, I think I was the RSM. I went out with a platoon and the platoon sergeant, I forget who he was, but his thing was he didn't want me to go because he didn't want to be the guy responsible for the RSM to get killed on a raid. And I said, don't worry about it, I'll stay. So we landed, we're going down the street and this one Ranger kept following me around and I looked at him and I was like, are you like my bodyguard? Yes, sir. Major platoon sergeant told me not to allow you So like I said, it's all that, you don't want to get in the way, but you got to be out there.
Yeah.
And that was always a challenge, especially as the RSM.
Yeah. Well, I want to definitely talk about you being the regimental sergeant major, but before we shift to that, so question, and you might not even remember. So BCO 275, Jeff Winstead gets hurt. This arrogant, cocky, sometimes piece of shit squad leader that was promotable was selected, kind of by battlefield promotion to take over for as a platoon sergeant. That was me. But the decision was made after the deployment to leave me in as the platoon sergeant for 275 because I was supposed to actually go over to ACO and take a platoon. Bernie Felino, he told me that I was selected because, I led him through the rest of the deployment. So it just made sense to leave me in there, and I'd done a good enough job and not made an ass of myself. So I was going to be left in as a platoon sergeant. I'm just wondering, is that true that what Bernie told me, or, was it not even a thought at all?
Well, the thought process is, you always have, hey, this is what we're going to do. You're a squad leader. You're a squad leader in a platoon. Historically, send you somewhere else.
Right.
And why do we send you somewhere else? It's not all about you. Everybody says, well, we want to send you because, you're friends with all the squad leaders and everybody else. Really, it's you're taking, I call it diversity. We are about diversity, but it's diversity of thought is what it is. To me, that's the most important thing, is the diversity of thought. So we're taking you out of this platoon and we're sending you to another company.
Right.
Because think about it, in regiment, BCO was different than ACO.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was different than CCO.
Yeah.
But every time we put somebody over there, it changed, especially as a platoon sergeant. You could change the dynamic of that company. Because what's one problem that squads, platoons, and companies and battalions have is they get that thing called groupthink. This isn't a psychology class, but they get that groupthink.
Yep, absolutely.
If you're in 3rd Platoon BCO and all you do is Jeeps and bikes, you don't know shit about, I was a JCT platoon sergeant. So all we did was jump out of planes. Every chance we get, we were jumping out of a plane. But I didn't know nothing about Jeeps and bikes. So if I would have, if you move around, and it's the same thing with you, Mike, we're going to move you to another platoon to bring that diversity of thought somewhere else. But oh, by the way, in this case, it doesn't matter because it would be stupid. Because he's already proved himself. He's already got his feet on the ground. It's working well. So let's just leave him where he's at.
All right. Just had to ask. I've always wanted to ask you that. I just never had the opportunity.
But that's one of those things where, everybody has a policy, but no policy is set in stone. And we've also the ones where people say, no, this is the policy. Well, it's all major. In this case, it's kind of stupid to do that. Nope. And the reason people don't want to do that is because, I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit, I don't know if arrogance is the right word, but, they're always afraid to like change their mind because they think it might, make them look like an ass and other people.
Yeah.
Shit. I made just as many mistakes as the RSM as I did as a private, probably more. Because as a private, my mistakes didn't really affect anybody else.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, that's the case. It would be stupid to move you after coming back from a deployment where you replaced another great Ranger that, the likes of Jeff Winstead, just because you have some policy.
Yeah. No, I've always just wanted to talk to you about that. And well, I got to invite you on a podcast to have the conversation, I suppose.
Yeah.
So,
but what you got to realize about the regiment, if it was anything negative, you wouldn't have stayed there.
Yeah, that's true.
You would have went down the street.
That's true. That's a very good point.
I mean,
that's true.
That's what we do.
Yeah, it is what we do. So being selected to, be the regimental sergeant major of the 75th, how excited were you and humbled by that?
Very, very humbled. I mean, that's, it goes back to, I guess once again, I called Mike Hall and asked him, and I asked him for, I said, hey, I selected to be the RSM, he was at USASOC at the time, what's your pearls of advice? He was going to tell me in 5 minutes, all the great things that, I need to do to be successful. And what he told me was, he goes, Doug, just remember, you're not the best guy for the job. You're the guy that survived the longest. And, you think about that and you go, did he just say I sucked? But, but really, I mean, if you think about that, it's a humbling, that's a humbling comment, because if you think about through your career, you were promoted to sergeant major. It was at 1% of the people in the Army. I get selected for RSM. I mean, there's a lot of great Rangers out there, NCOs who could have been the RSM. A lot of them weren't in a position to get selected, whether it was, physical or whether they decided for family reasons to move out and do something else. I I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
No, it absolutely does.
You know, there's a lot of people that are just not, I mean, a lot of it's about timing. Hey, you know, we need a, you know, it's the same thing with 275. You know, if I just took over a battalion and Randy got selected to be the RSM and I was in that position for 6 or 8 months, I never would have went to 275. So yeah, it was very humbling. And the thing about the job is the regiment moves faster than any one individual.
It definitely does. Yeah.
It's amazing. And you quickly realize in that job, you're not going to have a say in a lot of things that go on. You might have some input, but it's moving too damn fast to think that. I mean, we've all seen it before, where people think that, you know, everything that happens, you got to run by me for like approval. That doesn't happen in the Rangers. If you looked at what was going on during that time between standing up DECO, still solidifying the Echo company stand up, the dog program, I mean, bringing in the RSTB standing up, bringing in all the different MOSs and standing up all them strike forces. Things were moving very, very fast.
They were.
So it was all good though.
No, it was, you know, and that was going to be one of my questions, you know, being a 275 sergeant major and the regimental sergeant major during some of the most volatile times in the GWOT, but then also some of the most transformational time, you know, and just kind of talking about that and what that was like, because I mean, you're spot on when you say that the regiment was, you know, faster than any one individual. It was moving a million directions, and it was also moving at the speed of light, or speed of the fight, I suppose.
Yeah, and it was you know, and it was always trying to figure out, you know, where you yeah, I think a lot of sergeant majors and, you know, senior leaders struggle with that. You know, where do you fit the best? You know, do I need to go overseas and sit there for 2 years and park myself there and just rotate out with, you know, every unit that, or are there other things going on in the regiment that you need to, you know, you need to be involved in? I mean, the DECO stand up was going on, and I think LaCamera was the RCO at the time. And so we had to do the Delta Company certification. So he made the decision that, you know, we're going to send him out to NTC, and we're going to have NTC do the Delta Company certification because we want to show the Army, you know, of what the regiment can do. And we don't want people just to think that, you know, the regiment stood this thing up with inside itself and then certified it and checked off. So we rotated units through the NTC to get certified, and I think that paid huge dividends.
Yeah.
Huge dividends to the Rangers of Delta Company. But once again, it showcased the regiment on what they could do. Because I remember the Op 4 Brigade Sergeant Major was 19 Delta that I worked in the infantry branch. Or the combat arms branch when I was a guy. And I mean, he couldn't say enough good things about the Rangers when the Delta Company rolled through. So when we got done with that certification, there was a whole nother big part of the Army who was on the Ranger bandwagon of going, yeah, them guys from regiment, man, they're very professional. They're very good at what they do. And it, you know, it just showcased the regiment in a good light, you know, again. That makes sense?
No, absolutely. I think it absolutely does. And I was just, you know, kind of curious to your thoughts on that. So, you know, as we talk about, you know, just kind of your time, you know, as a Ranger, you know, and being able to serve in the community, you know, in and out of the community, you know, the whole time, which I call those, you know, kind of breaks and, you know, being in Ranger Regiment, you know, almost kind of Ranger appreciation tours. You know, what's kind of your collective kind of thoughts about the Ranger Regiment as a whole and the brotherhood and, you know, the common bond shared by many?
I think it's a bond built with hard work and sweat. And, you know, and that's, that's through training. That's on the battlefield. That's in a shoot house. What was it? Range 25 maze.
Yeah. Yep.
That's in some, chicken coop in the middle of Iraq. It's a bond built with a lot of sweat, and it's a bond built with our families too. Because I think for the most part, it really is, it's a family is what it is. And you train together, you fight together, you cry together, you live together. Ranger families hang out together. When you deploy, you got to have people to support on. And I think that's anytime that, as hard as Rangers train, there's no way you can't build a bond with each other, because you might not even like the person, but you seeing him or her in action, and you learn to respect them.
Yeah.
I think what it comes down to.
Yeah. I might not like you, but I respect the hell out of you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look around, when you're a squad leader or platoon sergeant, you get people that are different than you. And you're like, man, I would, I don't necessarily socialize with that person off duty, but damn, I respect him, as a fighter or as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think you build that bond over time. And it's really, and it goes back to, don't talk bad about my squad outside my squad, but don't talk about my platoon outside my platoon. And it goes all the way up to the regiment. It doesn't matter where you're from. If you're in the regiment, you're in the regiment. So, we're all brothers, with inside the regiment. And it's kind of like that bond that brings us all together.
I agree. Well, if you could stand in front of all Rangers, past, present, and future, what would you say?
Master the basics.
Okay.
I know that, people say, oh, right, that's so old school, master the basics. But
I don't think it's old school at all.
But it's the basics when I was a private is different than the basics now.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you gotta, whatever the basics are in your area, master the basics. It goes back to that, what are you going to do when the GPS faults out? Do you know how to read a map? What are you going to do when the laser goes out? Do you know how to shoot with iron sights? So you really got to master the basics, because if you master the basics, shoot, move, and communicate, everything kind of revolves around that. What's the old 7-8 battle drill? React to contact.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's me and you walking down an alleyway or walking and we take fire. What are we going to do? We're going to react to contact. We're probably going to get our ass down. We're going to start shooting back, and we're going to look at each other and go, you want to stay here and want me to go around, or you want me to stay here and you go around? It doesn't matter if you're doing it as an individual, a platoon, or, as a company. Back in the day, the basics was bring up the M60 machine guns and just slay lead. Nowadays the basics is, call in multiple little birds and AC-130s, but it's still the same basic thing.
Yeah.
So master the basics. And the last thing is, whatever you do, what you do is never about you. Because in the big scheme of things, and I'll be honest, the only reason this stuff is behind me, this is the only wall in my house I can hang it on, is because when we started this thing, there wasn't enough light in the room, so I had to push the chair to the other side. But in the end, it's never about you. As a Ranger, it's all about the regiment.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you do something that tarnishes the reputation of the regiment, that's going to be felt across the board. It's going to be felt throughout the Army. Remember, the Army only gives the regiment what they deserve. And And I used to use the analogy when people would say, they would laugh at us. They'd be like, oh, you guys get it easy because you don't do post support. I'd be like, really? You know what, to be honest, I wouldn't mind 4 or 5 weeks where all I had to do was detail people out to go to the gym and go, because I'm on one range after another, after a deployment. But what you do, it's never about you. It's about that patch you wear, if on your left shoulder or on your right shoulder or whatever. Never forget that. So the impression that you put outside the regiment or inside the regiment, is that going to be positive or negative? That's kind of what it comes down to. But with that said, we all make mistakes. You've made mistakes. I've made many mistakes.
Absolutely.
And, what do? You learn from your mistakes. And that's the key. Be humble enough to admit your mistakes, and then learn from your mistakes.
I appreciate that. That's sound advice for everybody. So, and the reason I asked that question is because, we have Rangers of all, that are currently serving, are getting ready to serve, or, have, now we're part of the graybeard society, so to speak. So no, I appreciate it. And I think that applies, in and out of the uniform as well. I think you continue to represent the Ranger Regiment, even outside of service as well. So, last question, it's kind of a two-parter is what are you doing now? And is there any kind of closing comments or closing thoughts you'd like to just kind of pass to the larger audience?
So now I work for a healthcare company, part of Cigna Healthcare. Has nothing to do with the military period. I managed, I started off managing all their print operations and their facilities, and actually got the job. General Clark, who was the division commander of the 82nd at the time, came to my retirement, and he asked me, he said, Doug, what are you going to do when you get out? And I said, no idea. I just want to work for a good company with good people. He goes, well, this guy, Eli Wahish. He goes, he lives right here in Bluffton. I didn't know that. But he was a 175 FSL. So I called Eli up on the phone and, went for an interview and, retired, signed out on terminal leave on a Friday and went to work on Monday. So life is good. So if you have the ability, for one, network,
Yep.
and Mike, this, you get ready to get out. It could be a scary thing, but network as much as you can. Send your resume out, get other people to review it, and just network. And if you have the opportunity, you might not have that job, but, talk to people about, it's not scary out here. And,
Yeah.
and back to your point, Abrams charter works no matter where you go. The stuff that I learned in the regiment, I use today. And it really is that. It's all about the regiment. And, my last, I guess it goes back to, what's your last piece of advice? Remember, the regiment is bigger than anybody that's in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. It's really bigger than it. Enjoy your time that you're there, if you're there, because it's going to go away eventually. And the good thing, though, is when it goes away, you can lie about what you really did back in the day. Yeah, but enjoy your time that was there, because it is just a phenomenal time. I can look back and, we talked about stories over and over, and it's always funny. A Ranger came up. He was out in Hilton Head, and we met for beers one night. And, I probably haven't seen him in like 10 years. And it's like that Ranger you bump into in the airport. You haven't seen him in like 10, 15 years. You're like, dude, what's up? You sit down, you drink a beer, and it's like it was yesterday. And you're so excited to be around another Ranger. And you tell some stories and you do all that, and then you leave. And you might not see the guy for another 10 or 15 years. But you're going to enjoy it. So enjoy it, and then stay connected. Stay connected. I mean, social media, it is what it is, but, there's a lot of good sites out there just to stay connected with each other. I'm not totally the best at it, I'll be honest. I could be better. But But just stay connected, but enjoy what you do. Enjoy what you do and love the regiment. However, when you leave, just remember, things change in the regiment. You served at a certain time, whether you left because you got too old to serve or you left for whatever reason. The people running the regiment know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
so
they do. Absolutely.
let them do it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep, absolutely.
You know, I try not to have an opinion. I don't, you know, not staying in touch, but, you know, enjoy what you do. Savor the moment. And that's really it. That's about it. And never, and I guess the last thing is never forget where you came from.
Yep, absolutely. Well, Sergeant Major, thank you, for coming on the show and just, talking to us about your kind of time in the 75th and, just tons of, wise words, sage words, dropped to the audience. And I know everybody's going to just absolutely love hearing from you and I'll also catching up with you and know what you're doing currently now. So thank you everybody for tuning into Legends of the 75th. Please share this episode so we can make sure it gets out to all of our Ranger buddies that might not know about it. Rangers lead the way.